In every corner of the city, there are secrets, stories that hide in plain sight, waiting in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to witness them. And tonight, we step into that darkness once again. Welcome to Dynamic Dark. Welcome to a brand new horror experience. Welcome to episode 39. I'm Aditya, and tonight, I bring you 3 terrifying creepypasta stories, each stranger, darker, and more unnerving than the last. New stories. New week. New nightmares. If you are new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you dare to face what comes next. Tonight's stories blur the line between reality and the unknown. Each one a descent into urban darkness and modern horror. Today's first story, The Locked Basement. 12 o'clock today's second story, The Cursed Painting. New moon symbol and today's final story, The Vanishing Friend. If you crave horror that blends supernatural chills with suspenseful tension and psychological dread, you are exactly where you need to be. Because this is Dynamic Dark. For the best experience, put on your earphones, turn off the lights, and let the shadows, suspense, and fear consume you. Now let's begin with our first story, The Locked Basement. It started on a night like any other, or so I believed. The house was silent, yet the silence itself felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the walls were holding their breath. I sat in the living room, the faint hum of the old ceiling fan the only sound I had known for years. Shadows danced on the edges of the room, bending strangely in the corners. At first, I told myself it was just the dim light, just the imagination. But then, I felt it. A sudden chill that wasn't there moments before, crawling along my spine, brushing the back of my neck, warning me to pay attention. I looked toward the end of the hallway and froze. Where only a blank wall had stood countless times before, a door now appeared. A basement door. Heavy, wooden, ancient, with iron hinges that looked like they had endured decades of neglect. I blinked, hoping it was a trick of the light, a reflection, something to explain away this impossible sight. But it was real. My house had never had a basement. Not until tonight. I inched closer, each step deliberate, my feet whispering against the floorboards. The air grew colder with every step, dense and wet, carrying the faint scent of damp soil and something else. Something old. Something that smelled of decay and time itself. A whispering began, barely audible at first, a sound I could almost convince myself was the wind. But it wasn't the wind. The whispers had rhythm, cadence, as if calling my name, teasing me, warning me, daring me at the same time. The door's surface seemed to throb under my fingers, alive in a way that made no sense. Shadows flickered behind it, moving against the wood in impossible patterns. My heartbeat accelerated, each pulse echoing like a drum in the empty hallway. I could feel the house leaning in, pressing me toward the threshold, as if it, too, were aware of the door's new presence. I reached out, hand trembling, brushing against the handle. A jolt of icy energy shot up my arm. The whispers grew louder, forming patterns in my mind, phrases that made no sense yet sent chills through my soul. Time seemed to warp. Seconds stretched to minutes, minutes to hours, though I had no way of knowing. The shadows deepened, the air thickened, and I could feel something unseen watching me from just beyond the wood. My breath quickened. My mind screamed to turn back, yet curiosity, or perhaps something darker, held me in place. I could sense the basement's secret pulsing behind the door, waiting. patient, ancient, alive. And I was standing on the edge of something I might never escape from. Asterisk. I had been standing there for what felt like an eternity, frozen between fear and curiosity. The whispers had grown louder now, echoing in the empty hallway, forming a rhythm that seemed almost alive, crawling into my mind and refusing to leave. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Something invisible held me in place, a force I couldn't name, pulling me closer to the basement door. The door loomed larger with each heartbeat, its wooden surface seeming heavier, almost oppressive, as if it contained the weight of everything it had ever concealed. I could feel the cold seeping through the floor, creeping up my feet and into my bones. My hands were clammy, trembling slightly, hovering near the handle. My breathing quickened, each inhale sharp and shallow, every exhale a fog that seemed to linger unnaturally. I tried to tell myself it was just a door, just a part of the house I had never noticed before. But the air around it was different, thicker, heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't understand. The silence of the house was gone. It had been replaced by a low hum, almost imperceptible but persistent. It resonated deep in my chest, pressing against my ribcage, a rhythm I could feel in my very bones. I took a small step forward, my foot hesitating, almost sliding on the cold, hard floor. The whispers intensified, teasing, taunting, urging me to make a choice. Behind me, the hallway stretched endlessly, shadows pooling in the corners, as if the walls themselves had grown taller, bending reality slightly to keep me trapped in this moment. Every nerve in my body screamed warning. I could feel my heartbeat echoing, hammering in my ears, matching the rhythm of the whispers. The doorknob was just inches away, cold and unforgiving, and yet I knew that if I touched it, there would be no turning back. The basement door was no longer just a door. It was a threshold, a point of no return. And whatever waited beyond it, whatever had been waiting for years, decades, perhaps centuries, was ready. Asterisk. I finally gathered the courage, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop, but curiosity, or something darker, kept me rooted. As I turned the handle, a wave of cold rolled out, heavier than anything I had ever felt, pressing against my chest, freezing my breath in midair. Stepping inside, the darkness was denser, almost solid, swallowing every sound and beam of light. My heart pounded as each footstep echoed unnaturally, stretching seconds into eternity. I could feel an unseen presence around me, silent, patient, and aware. Every instinct told me to run, yet I couldn't tear my gaze from the shadows that seemed to move just beyond sight. The air felt alive, pressing against my skin, whispering faintly in rhythms I couldn't understand. The silence was absolute, yet filled with tension so thick it made my lungs ache. My eyes strained to adjust, catching fleeting movements in the corner of vision that vanished whenever I tried to focus. The basement seemed to breathe, a slow, deliberate rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I forced myself to take another step, my mind torn between panic and fascination. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the walls, every draft of colder air felt intentional, as though guiding me deeper. Time stretched unnaturally, seconds felt like minutes, minutes like hours. The longer I stayed, the more the sense of being observed intensified, a quiet pressure pressing on my mind. Finally, I reached the center, pausing as a weight settled over me, a heavy, invisible presence that seemed to measure my fear. I realized then that opening the door had changed everything. This was no ordinary basement. It was alive in some unfathomable way, and it was aware that I was here. My heart raced, every muscle tense, as I acknowledged the truth. I had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. Asterisk. Every step I took deeper into the basement, the air grew colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. The faint whispers I had ignored before now formed a rhythm, rising and falling in patterns that my mind couldn't decipher. Words, or something resembling words, tugged at my thoughts, making it impossible to focus on anything else. My heart pounded like a drum in the silence, each beat amplifying the tension around me. The shadows stretched unnaturally, flickering at the edge of my vision. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every draft of cold air brushed against my skin, sending shivers down my spine. I tried to convince myself it was imagination, a trick of nerves, yet a deep unease settled in my chest, a sense that the basement was aware of my presence. I paused, trying to catch my breath, but the whispers persisted, growing louder, sharper, as if resonating inside my skull. I could feel every muscle tense, every fiber of my body screaming to flee, but something invisible held me, an almost magnetic pull drawing me forward. The deeper I ventured, the more distorted reality felt. Shadows shifted slightly, corners seemed to elongate, and the light from the doorway behind me dimmed as if being swallowed by the darkness. Then I felt it, a sudden, icy pressure against the back of my neck. My skin prickled, goosebumps spreading like wildfire. My instincts screamed to spin around, to escape, yet I froze, paralyzed by fear and fascination. The air seemed alive, almost sentient, pressing down, twisting the silence into a tangible weight. Each breath was heavy, each heartbeat echoing in the oppressive darkness, marking the passage of time in a space that felt endless. I moved forward again, slow, deliberate steps, my mind straining to process what was happening. The whispers continued, their rhythm almost hypnotic, pulling me into a state of heightened awareness where every sound, every movement, every subtle change in the atmosphere felt like a signal. My senses were hyper-alert, the faintest shift in air pressure, the slightest scrape of wood made my pulse spike. By the time I reached the center of the basement, the tension was suffocating. Every instinct screamed to turn back, yet I couldn't. The cold had become absolute, the whispers a constant thrum, the oppressive stillness pressing down from all directions. I realized then that the basement was no longer a simple room, it had become a presence itself, aware, patient, and waiting. And I was caught in its grip, teetering on the edge of whatever awaited me deeper in the shadows. Asterisk. I froze. Every instinct screamed at me to run, yet my feet were rooted to the ground. The darkness seemed to thicken around me, pressing closer, suffocating, as if the very air were alive. A sense of being watched, patient and unyielding, wrapped around my mind like an iron grip. I forced myself to breathe, each inhalation sharp and cold, each exhalation trembling in the oppressive silence. My heart thundered in my chest, every beat echoing in the space like a drum of warning. I turned slowly, each fraction of movement stretching time, my eyes straining to pierce the darkness. There it was, a shadowy form, indistinct yet undeniable, lingering at the edge of perception. I couldn't see details, yet I felt its presence, heavy and intent. It waited, patient, almost sentient, a silent predator observing my every reaction. My mind raced, trying to rationalize, to dismiss it as a trick of shadows, but every instinct told me otherwise. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying an almost tangible weight that pressed on my chest. Every sound became amplified, the faint creak of a floorboard, the subtle whisper of shifting air, the soft scrape of some unseen object. Each noise teased my imagination, conjuring shapes that danced just beyond comprehension. I tried to move, a step forward, then another, but my body resisted. Fear had rooted me in place, yet fascination, morbid and unrelenting, kept my gaze locked on that indistinct figure. The shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, elongating in ways that defied logic, every corner of the basement alive with unseen tension. Time itself felt suspended. Seconds dragged like hours. My thoughts spun, trying to grasp reality, trying to find a reason, a pattern, any rational explanation. But the figure remained, patient, silent, a reminder of the unknown lurking beyond perception. I realized then that this moment, this confrontation with the unseen, was the pinnacle, the height of dread, the peak of terror. Every nerve screamed, every breath strained against the invisible weight of fear. And I understood, whatever was here, whatever watched me, it had already claimed my attention, my awareness, my mind. I was trapped in the climax of the unknown, suspended between the instinct to flee and the horror of remaining, unable to escape the all-encompassing tension that consumed the basement and my very soul. Asterisk. I stumbled backward, my legs weak, my chest heaving with every desperate breath. The basement's darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were alive, unwilling to let me go. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I had just faced, what I had barely survived. Every step away from the door felt agonizingly slow, the shadows stretching unnaturally behind me, merging with the dim corners of the room. My eyes darted nervously, scanning for any movement, any sign that I was truly safe. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the subtle creaks and groans of the old house settling around me, each sound magnified by my racing heart. I could feel the weight of the basement lingering in the air, a pressure that clung to my skin, whispered to my thoughts, and gnawed at my resolve. Though I had escaped its grasp for now, the feeling of being watched, measured, and studied didn't leave me. It followed me, intangible yet unmistakable, pressing on the edges of my awareness like a shadow that refused to fade. As I reached the staircase, the dim light of the hallway barely illuminated my path, yet the darkness of the basement seemed to stretch, as if trying to extend itself beyond the door, reaching for me, calling me back. I wanted to look away, to forget, to flee entirely, but curiosity, morbid and irresistible, lingered. The questions, the unknowns, and the sheer incomprehensibility of what I had experienced clawed at my mind. Every instinct screamed that it wasn't over, that the basement, that oppressive darkness, remained patient and waiting. And I knew, with a sinking certainty, that it would wait for the next curious soul, for the next unwary visitor, just as it had waited for me. The air seemed heavier now, charged with unseen presence, a quiet reminder that some places are never empty, some shadows never fully recede, and some mysteries never truly die. As I stumbled into the light of the hallway, gasping for air and relief, a lingering chill traced my spine. The basement door loomed behind me, silent but expectant. I realized that escape was temporary, survival was fragile, and the darkness had merely paused, gathering, waiting for the next chapter, the next encounter, the next unwitting adventurer to cross its threshold. Asterisk. Today's second story, The Cursed Painting. It was just an old painting at first, hanging silently in the corner. But soon, I noticed something. It wasn't the same as yesterday. The frame was cracked and ancient, The glass cloudy with age, its corners eaten by time. The painting showed a pale woman in a black Victorian gown, standing before a crumbling stone archway under a moonlit sky. Her expression was blank, distant, almost peaceful. I had passed it 100 times without thinking twice. But one night, I stopped. Her eyes were no longer staring ahead, they were staring at me. A faint chill crept up my spine. The air in that part of the hallway grew dense, almost damp, and the candlelight flickered without wind. I stepped closer, and the closer I got, the colder it became. The woman's lips, painted a deep crimson, looked wetter than before, fresh. Alive. I blinked. Her face had shifted. The faintest smirk had appeared, a smile that didn't belong on something so still. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the moon in the painting had changed, too brighter, fuller, bleeding its silver glow across the background that now looked deeper. Too deep, like it could swallow light whole. That night, whispers filled the hallway. Soft, overlapping voices that came from nowhere and everywhere. I followed them, trembling, until I reached the painting again. The woman's head was tilted now, her hand pressed against the edge of the frame, her fingers half extended as though she was trying to step out. The smell of burnt oil and iron filled the room. I could hear the faint scrape of nails on wood, long, deliberate, from within the canvas. My reflection in the glass seemed distorted. Behind me, a faint movement, shapes forming in the dark corners of the hall. Thick, floating silhouettes. Not human, not solid, heavy ghostly figures, like masses of smoke and flesh, gliding across the air without sound. When I looked again, there were eyes behind her, glowing faintly, watching from the painted garden. The figures moved within the artwork, not painted but alive, writhing beneath the brushstrokes. I stumbled back, heart pounding, the whispers merging into a single voice that hissed my name. The candle extinguished itself. For a moment, only her eyes remained visible, two pale lights in the void. And then, as the dark consumed the hallway, I realized something horrifying. The painting wasn't hanging anymore. It was leaning forward, as if gravity itself was trying to pull it closer, or something inside was pushing to come through. The next morning, I tried convincing myself that it was nothing. Maybe the flickering candlelight had tricked my eyes. Maybe the long night and lack of sleep had created stories in my head. But when I walked past the hallway again, that small, familiar chill returned. I slowed down almost unwillingly, and my gaze found the painting. For a few seconds, I thought I was looking at something entirely new. The woman in the black gown was still there, standing beneath that pale moonlight. But behind her, there were faces. Faces that hadn't been there before. They were faint at first, half hidden in the painted shadows, but the longer I stared, the clearer they became. Men, women, children. Some looked frightened, some looked lifeless, and others looked angry. Their eyes were hollow, the paint around them darker than I remember. And one of them, one right near the archway, looked like it was staring directly at me. I leaned closer. The air felt colder. My reflection in the glass seemed faded, distant, as if the painting was more real than my own world. The face inside blinked. I froze. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it again, but then the faintest movement crossed its lips, like a whisper too soft to hear. The house was silent around me, yet I could feel a low vibration under the floorboards. The kind that travels through your feet, crawls up your spine, and sits quietly in your chest. I looked away, forcing myself to walk toward the other end of the hallway, but that feeling of being watched, that strange, heavy awareness, followed me. I didn't need to look back to know that every eye in that painting had turned toward me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every sound from the corridor outside my room made my heart race. At one point, I swore I heard soft murmurs, like a conversation happening just beyond my door. But when I opened it, there was nothing. Only the dim light of the hallway and the faintest outline of the painting at the far end. I told myself not to look. Not tonight. But curiosity has a way of pushing reason aside. So, I stepped closer, slow, careful, every breath shallow. The candlelight flickered as if reacting to something unseen. When I finally stood before the painting, I noticed the smallest, most horrifying detail: the woman's head had tilted. Just slightly. Enough to make her look alive. Her expression had changed too. That faint smile again, almost welcoming. But behind her now, there were more figures, their shapes crowding the background like a gathering storm. The air smelled faintly of burnt oil, and beneath it, something metallic like rust or blood. I could hear faint tapping sounds again from within the canvas. I stepped back, and the whispers grew louder, just enough for one word to slip through clearly: "Day." The hallway lights flickered once. And for a heartbeat, I saw something move inside the painting. A ripple across the surface, like breath fogging glass. Then it was still again. Silent. Harmless. But deep down, I knew something inside that painting had finally noticed me. That night, something inside me snapped, a mix of fear and defiance. I couldn't keep walking past that thing anymore. Every glance, every whisper, every chill had started to feel personal, deliberate. The faces in the painting seemed to multiply each time I looked. I needed to end it, to take it down, hide it, burn it if I had to. Anything to stop whatever was happening. When I finally walked up to the painting, the hallway was colder than usual. The air was thick, unmoving, almost like being underwater. The candlelight didn't reach this far anymore. It trembled faintly against the wall, as if even the flame was afraid. I took a deep breath and reached for the frame. The wood was damp, colder than ice, and when my fingers brushed the edge, it felt wrong, softer than it should have been, like skin. The moment I tried to lift it, it didn't move. It was heavy, impossibly heavy, as if nailed to the wall by something unseen. I gripped the sides harder, trying again, and that's when I felt it. Another hand. Cold, thin, impossibly soft. It brushed against my fingers from the other side of the frame. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. The touch lingered just a second, maybe less, but I could still feel it pressing faintly against my skin, like a pulse. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Slowly, I stepped back, but my hand stayed glued to the frame, like the air itself didn't want to let go. And then, it moved. The painting, or something inside it, breathed. The fabric behind the glass rippled slightly, as though air had been trapped within and was now trying to escape. The woman's painted hair swayed ever so slightly, her face flickering between peace and malice in the candlelight. I stumbled back, gasping, as a faint whisper broke the silence, so close it felt like it was right next to my ear. "Don't take it away." The voice wasn't just sound, it vibrated through the walls, through the floor, straight into my chest. I turned around instinctively, but there was no one behind me, just the long, empty hallway stretching endlessly into dark. When I looked back, the painting had changed again. The woman's hand was now pressed against the glass, and her fingers were perfectly aligned with where mine had been moments earlier. Behind her, the faces were clearer, no longer distant, no longer trapped in the background. They were leaning forward now, half emerged from the painted world, their faint outlines spilling past the borders of the frame. The air filled with that burnt oil smell again, thicker, stronger, mixed with something older, like rock. A faint fog began to seep out from beneath the painting, rolling slowly across the floor. I could hear movement now, not from within the painting, but behind the wall itself, like something crawling through the structure of the house, dragging against the wood and brick. I backed away further, my breath shallow, but my eyes refused to leave the frame. For a split second, I saw it, a face, pale and featureless, press itself outward from the inside of the canvas, stretching the surface like it was made of liquid. Its mouth opened in silence, forming a shape that could only be a scream. And then, as suddenly as it began, the movement stopped. The fog faded. The hallway felt deathly quiet again. I stood there, trembling, staring at that still, cursed image, but now, I knew for certain. There was something alive in that painting. And it wasn't just watching. It was reaching. Every night, the painting seemed to change, subtly at first, then unmistakably. The woman in black was no longer alone. One night, a second figure appeared beside her, a man with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched into a faint, unnatural smile. His hand rested on her shoulder, though the brush strokes looked fresh, almost wet under the flickering candlelight. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but each night there were more. The next evening, there were 3 faces. Then 4. By the end of the week, the frame was crowded with pale figures, some blurred, others sharp, all turned toward me. They weren't strangers anymore. They were people I knew. My reflection, my friends, even my family, their faces emerged from the canvas, distorted, drained of warmth. I could see my own eyes painted near the corner, wide and lifeless, staring back at me with a terror I couldn't comprehend. The air around the painting grew heavier with every passing night. Shadows deepened unnaturally, pooling beneath the frame like spilled ink. Whispers began, low, desperate murmurs calling my name, weaving through the house at impossible hours. Sometimes, I would wake up and find the painting glowing faintly in the dark, as if something inside it breathed. Then came the night I saw movement. A faint twitch, one of the faces blinked. Another's mouth trembled. I froze, unable to look away. Their lips began to move in perfect unison, whispering without sound. My heartbeat thundered in my chest as the woman's eyes rolled upward, and the faint sound of scratching echoed from inside the frame. I reached for the candle, my hand trembling, and in that brief flicker of light, I saw it, the figures in the painting were no longer flat. They were pressing outward, distorting the canvas from within, their hollow faces stretching against the surface as if trying to escape. The edges of the frame creaked and warped, small cracks appearing where the painted world met mine. The smell of burning paint filled the air. I stepped back, but the whispers turned into screams, muffled, trapped cries echoing from inside the artwork. I could feel them watching me from beyond the layer of oil and pigment, their stares hot and suffocating. And then, silence. For a moment, everything was still. Until I noticed one horrifying detail, the woman's hand, which had once been raised within the frame, was now pressed flat against the glass from the inside. That night, the painting was no longer just a painting, it was alive. The woman inside smiled wider than humanly possible, her eyes gleaming with a wet, glassy light. The air around the frame shimmered as if breathing, and faint movements rippled beneath the brushstrokes. Then I saw it, her hand, slowly pushing through the canvas, its pale fingers dripping with black paint that smelled like decay. The whispers grew louder, clearer, calling my name from inside the frame. I tried to back away, but the floor felt glued beneath me. Her eyes followed my every move, and then, in the reflection of the glass, I saw her standing behind me. I locked the room and walked away, certain it was over. But by morning, the painting was gone, vanished without a trace. Only the scent of burnt oil lingered, and a faint whisper echoed from the walls. Days later, I saw it again, not in my home, but in someone else's. The same pale woman, the same hollow eyes staring through another frame. Every time the painting reappears, someone new disappears. It moves on its own now, finding its next home, its next audience. And if you ever wake up to an unfamiliar painting in your house, don't look too long. It already knows you are watching. And today's final story, The Vanishing Friend. It started with a message from a friend I thought I knew. But something was off, the words felt wrong, distant, almost hollow. His texts came late at night, filled with strange typos and phrases he'd never use. When I called, the voice sounded like his, but slower, heavier, like someone imitating him. Then came the final message, I'm outside. Let me in. But when I looked through the window, no one was there. At first, I thought it was a prank, or a glitch, maybe my imagination. But then the photos began to change, and I realized something far worse. Every picture of us together, my friend was vanishing. His hands, his face, his entire body fading into shadows. And behind him, faint ghostly silhouettes appeared, hovering in the corners of the photos, twisted, floating, watching me. Their hollow eyes seemed to follow my gaze, their whispers echoing from the frames. The air in the room grew icy, shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Reality itself felt distorted, as if unseen spirits were pulling him away, erasing him from existence before my eyes. Messages stopped coming. Calls went unanswered. But late at night, I could hear footsteps, soft and familiar, echoing in the hall. Each step was deliberate, slow, but when I looked, no one was there. The air grew cold and heavy, carrying whispers I couldn't place. Thick, floating shapes hovered just above the floor, dark and silent, their hollow eyes following me. The presence was tangible, I could feel it moving with me, always a step behind, patient, watching, waiting. I knew then, something had taken him, and it was not done. I went to their apartment empty. Their things vanished, leaving only a single photo. I held it, and my blood ran cold. They were there, staring straight at me, but the world behind them was wrong, dark, endless, filled with thick, floating spirits with hollow, glowing eyes. Shadows hovered inside the frame, shifting silently, as if alive. Their gaze wasn't just watching, it was waiting, calling me into that darkness. And then I realized. I was the only one who remembered them. Every trace of my friend had vanished, from photos, messages, even the memories of others. Yet in my mind, I could see them clearly. Around me, thick, semi-transparent spirits floated silently, grotesque and unsettling, with hollow eyes and distorted forms. Some hovered just above the floor, others drifted near the ceiling, all watching me. The air grew icy, whispers brushed past my ears, and I knew they weren't gone. They were waiting, circling, observing, just for me. I don't know if they're gone or still waiting. Watching. Hoping I'll vanish next, like everyone else who ever crossed their path. That was the end of episode 39 of Dynamic Dark. If you enjoyed these terrifying stories, make sure to comment below which story scared you the most. The best comment will be pinned by me, Aditya. So, don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications bell if you dare to see what comes next. And share with your friends and family too. Or you can suggest a topic for the next episode, like a foreign urban legend, haunted place, or any other creepy horror story. The suggestion with the most likes might be featured in the next episode. Until then, keep listening to terrifying stories, because we'll be back soon with episode 40. And in the next episode, we'll bring you creepypasta horror stories. Yes, an English episode this time. Stay tuned and keep watching the horror episodes of Dynamic Dark. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new horror episode. New fears, new darkness, and new secrets. Join the Dynamic Dark family with 3 brand new terrifying stories.